Okay, this is just going to be a quick video on a reminder on how to analyze data using a Google Sheet. All right, so this is the same spreadsheet that I provided you in class, if you were in class. And we want to learn how to determine the mathematical relationship between two sets of data. And you can see here, I've got some data here, and you can see that I'm analyzing the linear relationship to begin with. So again, the way we analyze this data, we are going to block the information we want with our x-axis on the left and our y-axis on the right. And at this point, we're going to use the Insert Chart tab to create a chart. And again, the chart gets created. We are not wanting a bar graph. So the chart type we will click on and change it to an XY scatter plot. And you can see here nicely, it's put the axes in. If you're doing this for our lab, make sure you include units. Now, we want to analyze this line. So on the Customize tab, and then ultimately the Series tab, we want to add a trend line. And you can see there's a nice trend line. And if we drag down a little bit, you can see here the title label. I'm not a fan of it, but in the end, we want to click on Use Equation. And you can see there, it generates a nice equation for us. And just as a reminder, at this point, you could copy this chart and paste it into your Google Doc. All right, so let's take a look at the next series, which is a partial linear situation, creating the graph the same way. Again, in science, we like XY scatter plots so that we can see what the trend is. And notice in this one, it doesn't go through 0, 0, which means it's a partial linear relationship. And as I stated in the lesson, that in order for us to analyze this, we really want to see the point where it does hit that x-axis, all right? So in the end, we want to adjust this x-axis to, and you'll notice I clicked on the x-axis, which opens up a tab, horizontal axis, and it allows me to change the minimum value. I'll keep the maximum at 6, but I want to see where this is going to touch, probably about -1 and a bit. So I'm going to put here -2 as my new x-axis. And there you can see there, actually we haven't added the trend line yet. We're going to do that, but it will touch down over here. So let's add that trend line again. Series, add trend line. There we can see the x-intercept. Again, we can use the equation. Again, keep in mind, this is y equals mx plus b, with 4 being the y-intercept or intercept. We ultimately want that x-intercept, all right? In order to get the x-intercept, we would make y equal to 0, and we would solve for x, all right? Okay, all right. Let's now take a look at one of these inverse relationships and how we straighten the curve. So again, we start by making our graph just as we did before. All right, we click on that. And again, we don't want an XY scatter, or sorry, we don't want a bar graph. We want an XY scatter plot. And you can see here that it is a nice curve and it is looking like an inverse relationship. It's hard to tell whether it's inverse to the exponent -1 or 1 over x, or whether it's inverse square, et cetera, et cetera. We can put a trend line on this, all right? It assumes linear. You can see here under type, but if we want it to fit nicely, this is what we would call I gotta move this down so I can see what's happening. This is what we would call a power series. There you can see it quite nicely. Again, we can add an equation, right? Add an equation, and you can see there that says 0.25x to the exponent -1. Remember, x to the -1 is the same as 1 over x. So this tells us that it is inverse. But let's test that. Let's straighten the curve. So how do we straighten a curve? Well, as I stated in the lesson, we want to now graph 1 over x versus y to see if that is straight. So I'm going to make a new column of 1 over x, all right? Again, the way we calculate this, I'm going to have to do 1 divided by 1, and 1 divided by 2, and 1 divided by 3. A spreadsheet works really handy in doing this. If I press equals, all right, that tells the spreadsheet that we're going to start doing some math. Now I'm going to press 1 and divided by. And instead of putting 1, I'm going to click on this cell right here, A2, and it's now going to do a calculation of 1 divided by whatever is in A2. I'm going to press enter. 1 divided by 1 is 1. Now, you might think we have to type that in for every spot, but a spreadsheet is smart. So if I click on this box, oops, that's a mistake. Let's delete that away. Don't want to do that. Let's undo that. If I click on this box and I drag it down 6 spots or 5 spots, it will do the math for me. So if I click now on this guy, notice it does 1 over A3. 1 over A3, awesome. 1 over A4, nice, 1 over A4. If I go down to here, 18, notice I've dragged it too far, 1 over A8. There's nothing in A8, so I'm going to just delete that away. We don't need that. So we've created our 1 over X column. I want to graph that with respect to Y. So I'm just going to do a Control C and a Control V, and I'm going to repaste the Y values. So now I have 2 columns, 1 over X and Y, and I want to graph that. And I want to see whether it's straight or not. I'm going to graph it the same way. Again, we're going to get a funny looking bar graph because the computer is interpreting that we want to analyze the data a certain way, and we want to analyze it scientifically, XY scatter plot, and you'll see nicely, now we've got a nice straight line. You'll notice it doesn't go through 0, 0. I'm not concerned about that here. All I was concerned about in this graph, this second graph, was that it is a line. And you can see that it is a line, all right? So that proves to us that we were correct on our guess that this is a 1 over X relationship. If this was a 1 over X squared relationship, this would not be straight, and we would make a new guess and a new graph. Keep in mind, for the experiment, we are going to want titles for the axes, and for some reason it doesn't put titles on this second graph. So you need to now go back to our Customize. I'm going to close up the Series tab, go to Chart, Title, and Axis, Chart, Title, and this is now Y versus 1 over X. So I will type Y versus 1 over X, and it will add it for me. All right, oh, I missed the 1, so let's type that 1 in, 1 over X. I can drag down this bar, horizontal axis, horizontal, that's my 1 over X, 1 over X. And I can change that one more time, the vertical axis, and that is just going to be Y. Okay. Now, for your lab, you're not going to have X's and Y's. You're going to have P's and V's or P's and T's. And also, each of these axes must include units. For example, if the Y-axis is in units of, say, milliliters, I must put that unit in there in order for it to be completely correct. And you can see there it puts it in, okay? So this is how we straighten a curve if we end up with what might be an inverse relationship. If we get a straight line on our hypothesis that it is inverse, then we know for certain, yes, we have an inverse relationship. Y is proportional to 1 over X, and we can now create a relation equation. So hopefully that clears things up and allows you to analyze your data effectively.